Cole Bennett thought he was just rescuing a wounded husky from the harsh Wyoming winter. But when Shadow recovered, the dog's strange behavior led him deep into the wilderness, to a discovery that would shatter everything he believed about his family's past and change his life forever. If this story captivates you, please consider subscribing to Second Chance Stories and sharing it with someone who needs to hear a tale of unexpected connections and the power of loyalty that transcends generations. Your support helps us bring more incredible stories to light. The wind cut across the Wyoming plains like a blade, carrying with it the promise of another brutal winter storm. Cole Bennett stood on the weathered porch of his family's ranch house, watching dark clouds gather on the horizon. At 42, he had the weathered hands and steady gaze of a man who had spent his entire life working the land his grandfather had claimed over a century ago. The Bennett Ranch sprawled across 3,000 acres of high country, where prairie grass met pine forest and the Rockies rose like ancient sentinels against the sky. It was good land, hard-won and harder kept, but it had been struggling for years. Cattle prices were down, drought had been merciless, and the banknotes were coming due with increasing frequency. Cole pulled his worn Stetson lower against the wind and stepped down from the porch. His boots crunched on the frozen ground as he made his way toward the main barn, where his daily rounds awaited. The familiar routine of checking on the livestock and his two ranch dogs had become both a comfort and a reminder of everything he stood to lose. He was halfway to the barn when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the familiar symphony of his ranch. It was a dog's howl, but wrong somehow, filled with pain and desperation. Cole stopped, his head tilted, listening intently. The sound came again, fainter this time, from somewhere beyond the north pasture. Without hesitation, Cole changed direction, jogging toward the sound. As he crested a small hill, he saw the source of the distress. Near the edge of his property line, where his land met the vast expanse of public wilderness, a dog lay collapsed in the snow. It was a magnificent Siberian husky, its coat a striking mix of silver, black, and white that should have been thick and luxurious. But something was terribly wrong. The animal was on its side, its breathing labored, and as Cole drew closer, he could see dark stains in the snow around it. "Easy there, boy," Cole murmured, approaching slowly with his hands visible. The dog's ice-blue eyes tracked his movement, intelligent and alert, despite its obvious distress. This was no stray. The animal's build and bearing spoke of good breeding, careful training. Cole knelt in the snow beside the husky, his experienced hands running gently along its neck and sides. What he found made his jaw clench with anger. This dog had been shot, not by a hunter's clean rifle shot, but by something smaller, crueler. Maybe a .22. Multiple wounds across the animal's flank and legs, not immediately life-threatening, but clearly designed to cause suffering. "What kind of monster does this to you, boy?" Cole whispered, his voice tight with fury. The husky's eyes met his, and in them, Cole saw something that stopped him cold. Not just pain, but purpose. This animal had been trying to get somewhere, and whoever had shot him had been trying to stop him. Working quickly, Cole assessed the injuries. The dog could be saved, but it would need immediate attention. He jogged back to the ranch house, grabbed his truck, along with his veterinary supplies. Cole had been patching up animals for decades. When you live this far from town, you learn to be your own vet for everything short of surgery. Loading the injured husky took careful work. The dog was weak, but cooperative, as if he understood Cole was trying to help. Once they were back at the ranch, Cole settled the husky in his mudroom on a pile of blankets, cleaned the wounds, and administered antibiotics and pain medication. "You're going to make it," Cole told the dog, stroking his thick fur gently. "But I've got to call you something while you heal up. How about Shadow? You've got that dark mask across your face, and something tells me you move like a ghost when you're healthy." The husky's ears pricked forward at the name, and Cole could have sworn he saw approval in those striking blue eyes. Over the next week, Cole watched Shadow recover with remarkable speed. The dog had a constitution like iron and a will to live that impressed even Cole, who had seen plenty of tough animals in his time. But as Shadow healed, something strange began to happen. The husky would stand at the north-facing window for hours, staring out toward the wilderness with an intensity that was almost human. When Cole let him out into the yard for bathroom breaks, Shadow would run to the north fence and pace, howling softly toward the distant hills, not the typical husky vocalization, but something more purposeful, more urgent. "What's out there, boy?" Cole would ask. But Shadow would only continue his restless pacing, his attention fixed on something only he could see. By the second week, the behavior had intensified. Shadow would barely eat, spending most of his time at the fence, calling toward the wilderness. When Cole approached with food or water, the dog would look at him with such obvious frustration that it was almost comical, if it weren't so concerning. Cole had seen dogs pine for their home territory before, but this was different. Shadow wasn't homesick. He was on a mission. On a cold Tuesday morning, Cole woke to find his back door standing open and Shadow gone. Heart pounding, he rushed outside, expecting to see the husky heading for the highway or lost somewhere on the ranch. Instead, he found the dog standing calmly by the gate that led to the wilderness area. His head turned expectantly toward Cole. "You want me to follow you?" Cole said aloud, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "That's what this is about." Shadow took a few steps toward the wilderness, then stopped and looked back, his meaning unmistakable. The classic behavior huskies were famous for when they wanted their humans to follow. Cole stood at the crossroads of decision. Every practical instinct told him to bring Shadow back inside and secure the door properly. He had work to do, bills to pay, a ranch to run, but something deeper, some instinct honed by decades of working with animals, told him that Shadow's behavior wasn't random. The dog had survived being shot, had somehow found his way to Cole's ranch, and now was trying to lead him somewhere specific. "All right, boy," Cole said finally, "you win. But if we're going into the wilderness, we're doing it right." An hour later, Cole had packed supplies for a day trip. Water, food, first aid kit, his rifle, and a GPS device. The storm clouds were building, but they still had several hours before the weather turned nasty. He loaded Shadow into his truck and drove as far as the old logging roads would take them, then continued on foot. Shadow moved with the confidence of an animal following a familiar trail, though Cole could see no path. They climbed steadily into the foothills, through stands of aspen and pine, the air growing thinner and colder with each mile. The husky would occasionally stop and look back, making sure Cole was following, then continue with renewed purpose. After 3 hours of steady climbing, they crested a ridge and Cole got his first clear view of their destination. In a small valley below, partially hidden by a thick stand of evergreens, smoke rose from the chimney of what looked like an old cabin. Cole felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. This was deep wilderness, miles from any road or official trail. What was someone doing out here? And why had Shadow been so desperate to lead him to this place? As they descended into the valley, Cole's unease grew. The cabin looked old, but well-maintained, and there was something off about the whole setup. No vehicle was visible, no obvious way for supplies to be brought in. The windows were covered with what looked like heavy curtains, and despite the smoke from the chimney, there were no other signs of normal human habitation. Shadow led him directly to the cabin, then stopped about 50 yards away. The dog was trembling now, not from cold, but from something else. Excitement, fear, or both. Cole approached the cabin on foot, his hand resting on the rifle at his side. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the whisper of wind through the pines and the distant sound of his own heartbeat. He was 20 feet from the front door when he saw them. Heavy chains wrapped around the door handles, secured with a thick padlock. The sight hit him like a physical blow. Someone was locked inside this cabin, and they had been there long enough for whoever was holding them to feel confident enough to leave. Cole's military training from his younger days kicked in. He moved quickly but quietly around the perimeter of the cabin, checking for other exits, other threats. What he found made his blood run cold. The windows weren't just covered, they were barred on the outside. This wasn't a cabin, it was a prison. He returned to the front door and examined the lock. It was old but solid. Cole pulled a multi-tool from his pack and went to work on it. Years of ranch work having taught him to be resourceful with locks and mechanical problems. After several tense minutes, the lock clicked open. Cole unwound the chains and let them drop to the ground with a metallic clatter. He drew his rifle, though some instinct told him the real danger wasn't inside the cabin. Taking a deep breath, he pushed the door open. The interior was dim, lit only by the glow from a fireplace. Cole stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. The cabin was spartanly furnished, a small kitchen area, a couple of chairs, a table covered with what looked like old papers and books. "Hello?" Cole called softly. "Is anyone here?" The answer came as a weak cough from a back room. Cole moved toward the sound, his heart hammering. In a small bedroom, lying on a narrow bed, was an elderly woman. She was frighteningly thin, her silver hair tangled and unkempt, but her eyes were alert and intelligent. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Help me." Cole was at her side immediately, checking her pulse, her breathing. She was weak, dehydrated, but alive. "Ma'am, my name is Cole Bennett. I'm going to get you out of here. Can you tell me your name?" "Ellen," she managed. "Ellen Cartwright. How did you—" "No one comes up here." "A dog led me here," Cole said, gently helping her sit up. "A husky named Shadow. He seemed to know exactly where to find you." Ellen's eyes widened, and despite her weakness, she gripped Cole's arm with surprising strength. "Shadow! My Shadow! He's alive!" Cole's mind reeled. This was her dog. Somehow, Shadow had escaped whatever had happened here and made his way to Cole's ranch, then led him back to find Ellen. "He's fine, Mom. He's right outside. But we need to get you some help. Who did this to you? How long have you been here?" Ellen's story came out in whispered fragments. She lived alone on a small homestead, about 10 miles from where Cole had found Shadow. Her nephew, a man named Craig Dalton, had been pressuring her to sell her land to a mining company. The property sat on what geological surveys suggested was a significant mineral deposit worth millions. When Ellen refused to sell, Craig had taken matters into his own hands. He'd come to her house 3 weeks ago with 2 other men, claiming they were taking her somewhere safe while they sorted out the legal issues. Instead, they brought her to this remote cabin and told her she'd stay here until she agreed to sign over the property. "Craig comes every few days," Ellen whispered. "Brings just enough food and water to keep me alive. He says when I'm ready to be reasonable, I can sign the papers and go home. But I know he's lying. Once I sign, I'll never leave this place." Cole felt a familiar cold rage building in his chest. He'd dealt with his share of land grabbers and con artists over the years, but this was beyond anything he'd encountered. "Ellen, do you know why Shadow would have come to my ranch specifically? How would he know to find me?" Ellen's eyes studied his face carefully, as if searching for something. "What did you say your name was?" "Cole Bennett. My family's ranch is about 15 miles southeast of here." Ellen's hand went to her throat, her eyes filling with tears. "Bennett. The Bennett Ranch. Oh my God, you're William Bennett's grandson, aren't you?" Cole's world tilted. His grandfather's name was rarely spoken these days, and he certainly hadn't expected to hear it in a cabin prison in the wilderness. "Yes, ma'am. But how do you—" "Your grandfather saved my life once," Ellen said, her voice stronger now. "It was 1943. I was just 19. My family's wagon broke down in a blizzard, and we would have frozen to death if William Bennett hadn't found us. He brought us to his ranch, gave us shelter for 3 days until the storm passed. He was the kindest man I ever met." Cole sat back on his heels, stunned. "I never heard that story." "There's more," Ellen continued. "Your grandfather and we became close during those 3 days. After the war, he asked my father for permission to court me. We were going to be married." The words hit Cole like a physical blow. "What happened?" Ellen's eyes were distant now, lost in memory. "My family moved away that spring. My father got a job offer in California, and he wanted a fresh start. William promised to come find me, but—" She shrugged sadly. "Life happened. I married someone else, had children, built a life, but I never forgot him. When I inherited my grandfather's property here in Wyoming 20 years ago, I came back partly hoping I might see him again. But by then, he'd been gone for years." Cole's mind was racing. All the pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. "Ellen, when Shadow got away from Craig, he didn't run home. He came looking for my family. He remembered the Bennett Ranch from when you used to visit with him." "I did," Ellen confirmed. "When I first moved back, I used to walk these hills all the time with Shadow. We'd sometimes go past your ranch. I could never bring myself to stop, but Shadow knew the way. I always wondered about William's family, what had become of them." A sound outside made them both freeze. The distant rumble of an ATV engine. Cole moved quickly to the window and peered out through a gap in the curtains. A man on a four-wheeler was approaching the cabin, a rifle slung across his back. "That's Craig," Ellen whispered, terror creeping into her voice. Cole's training took over. "Ellen, I need you to stay calm. Can you move?" "I think so." "Good. When I give you the signal, I want you to get up and go to that back corner behind the bed. Stay low and don't make a sound no matter what happens." Cole positioned himself beside the front door, his rifle ready. The ATV engine cut off, and he could hear footsteps crunching on the frozen ground outside. A key rattled in the lock, or tried to. Cole heard a confused curse as Craig realized the chains were gone. The door flew open, and Craig Dalton stepped inside, his rifle raised. He was a big man, probably in his 40s, with the soft look of someone who'd spent more time in boardrooms than outdoors. His eyes swept the room, taking in Cole's presence with shock and rage. "Who the hell are you?" Craig demanded, swinging his rifle toward Cole. "The man who's going to put you in prison," Cole replied calmly. "Put the gun down, Craig. It's over." Instead of complying, Craig's face twisted with fury. "You don't understand what you're interfering with, cowboy. This is business. Big business. That old woman is sitting on a fortune, and she's too stubborn to see reason." "So you decided to torture her into compliance," Cole said, his voice deadly quiet. "Real business-like. It would have worked too, if that damn dog hadn't—" Craig stopped, his eyes widening, as he saw shadow through the open door. "That mutt should be dead. I shot him myself." "You missed the vital organs," Cole said. "Lucky for Ellen. Unlucky for you." Craig's calculation was visible on his face. He was clearly trying to decide whether to shoot Cole or try to talk his way out of the situation. Cole could see the exact moment when greed won over caution. "You know what? Maybe this works out better. 2 accidents are easier to explain than 1. Old woman got lost in the wilderness. Concerned rancher went looking for her. Tragic winter storm caught you both." Craig was raising his rifle when Cole moved. Years of ranch work had kept him in better shape than Craig's soft lifestyle, and Cole's military training had never really left him. He dove to the side as Craig fired, the shot going wide, then came up with his own rifle ready. "Drop it," Cole commanded. Instead, Craig tried to work the bolt on his rifle for another shot. Cole didn't hesitate. His shot took Craig in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his rifle flying. Craig went down hard, clutching his wounded arm and screaming. Cole was on him immediately, kicking the fallen rifle well out of reach. "Ellen, you okay?" "I'm fine," came her shaky voice from behind the bed. Cole pulled out his cell phone, not surprised to find no signal this deep in the wilderness, but he'd come prepared for that possibility. From his pack, he pulled out a satellite communicator, a recent purchase he'd made for situations exactly like this. Within minutes, he'd sent an emergency message to the sheriff's department, complete with GPS coordinates. Help would be on the way, though it would take time to reach them in this remote location. Cole used some old bedding to bandage Craig's shoulder. He wasn't going to let the man bleed to death, no matter what he'd done. Then he helped Ellen to the main room, settling her in a chair by the fire while they waited for rescue. Outside, Shadow sat patiently, his tail wagging slowly as he watched through the open door. The husky had completed his mission. "I still can't believe Shadow found you," Ellen said, her voice stronger now that the immediate danger had passed. "It's like he knew somehow that William's family would help." Cole looked out at the husky, who was now lying down but still alert, those blue eyes never leaving the cabin. Dogs remember more than we give them credit for, and loyalty, real loyalty, doesn't die with time. 2 hours later, the wilderness around the cabin was filled with the sound of helicopters and rescue vehicles that had managed to reach them via old logging roads. Craig was airlifted to a hospital under guard, while Ellen was taken to receive proper medical care. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Craig's scheme. He'd been working with a mining company that had been quietly buying up land in the area, often through less than ethical means. Ellen's property was the last piece they needed for a major extraction operation, and Craig stood to make millions from the deal. But there was more. In Ellen's cabin, investigators found a collection of documents that told a story spanning decades. Ellen had kept every letter William Bennett had written to her after her family moved to California. Letters that revealed he had indeed tried to find her, had traveled to California twice looking for her family, letters that told of his heartbreak when he couldn't locate them, and his eventual decision to return to Wyoming and build the life he'd dreamed of sharing with her. The last letter, dated just 5 years before William's death, contained a revelation that left Cole speechless. His grandfather had discovered that Ellen had returned to Wyoming, but by then he was ill, too proud to reach out as a sick old man to the woman he'd loved as a young one. Instead, he'd changed his will, leaving a significant portion of the ranch to Ellen if she could ever be found. Cole had been living with the financial struggles of the ranch for years, never knowing that his grandfather had already provided a solution. The legal paperwork was complex, involving decades-old wills and property laws, but the intent was clear. Ellen Cartwright was as much an owner of the Bennett Ranch as Cole himself, but Ellen had a different idea. "I don't want your ranch, Cole," she said when they met at the lawyer's office weeks later. "What I want is to see your grandfather's dream finally come true." Together, they hatched a plan that honored both the past and the future. Ellen would remain the co-owner of the ranch, but rather than dividing the property, they would combine their resources, Ellen's mineral-rich land and Cole's operational ranch, to create something neither could have achieved alone. They established the Bennett-Cartwright Ranch, a working cattle operation that also included a dog rescue program specializing in huskies and other northern breeds. Ellen's mining revenues would fund the operation, allowing them to take in dogs like Shadow, animals that had been abused, abandoned, or were simply unwanted. The day they officially opened the rescue program, Cole stood in the main yard watching Ellen work with a group of rescued huskies. At 76, she moved with the easy confidence of someone who had found her purpose. Shadow stood nearby, the unofficial leader of the pack, his thick coat gleaming in the afternoon sun. "You know," Ellen said, approaching Cole with a smile, "I think William would have loved this." Cole nodded, looking out over the property where 24 dogs played peacefully. "I think you're right. He always said the land should take care of those who couldn't take care of themselves." Shadow trotted over to them, leaning against Ellen's leg with obvious affection. The dog that had started this entire journey with his desperate mission through the snow was now the foundation of their breeding program. His intelligence and loyalty traits they were working to pass on to future generations. As the sun set over the Wyoming hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Cole reflected on how a single act of kindness, rescuing an injured dog, had led to the discovery of a family secret that spanned generations. He thought about the thin threads of connection that bind lives together, how loyalty and love can survive decades of separation and loss. The Bennett-Cartwright Ranch had become more than either Cole or Ellen could have imagined alone. It was a place of healing for animals and humans alike. It was proof that some stories don't end with separation and heartbreak. Sometimes, if you're patient enough, if you're brave enough to follow where loyalty leads, they get a second chance at the ending they were always meant to have. And it all started because one remarkable husky refused to give up, refused to forget, and somehow knew that the descendants of William Bennett would honor the bond their ancestor had forged with the woman who had never stopped loving him. This incredible story reminds us that sometimes the most unexpected connections lead to the most extraordinary discoveries. If this tale touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that loyalty and love can bridge any gap, and that family extends far beyond blood relations. Don't forget to subscribe to Second Chance Stories for more amazing tales of courage, connection, and the unbreakable bonds between humans and dogs. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful reminders that miracles happen when we're brave enough to follow where they lead. Because every dog deserves a second chance, and every story of loyalty deserves to be told. Thanks for watching.